Renato got out of the car and stood before the wooden gate as if the ground had turned to quicksand. The ranch was there, just as he remembered it, perhaps a little more bent, a little more tired, like everything that ages without being cared for by loving hands. The colonial roof had moss stains on the edges. The stone wall, once perfectly aligned by his grandfather, now showed fine cracks, like exposed veins of a story that no one else wanted to tell. He took a deep breath, feeling the humid mountain air enter his lungs with a weight that wasn't just oxygen. It was memory. It was guilt. It was everything he had spent 12 years trying to forget. Renato was 43 years old. His face was still handsome, but in a different way now, like a wall that had been repainted so many times it had lost its original texture. There were lines around his eyes that didn't come from laughter, but from insomnia. There was a permanent crease between his eyebrows, as if he lived in a constant state of calculation, trying to solve an equation that never worked. He wore a navy blue dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, dark trousers, and shoes that didn't match the red earth that was beginning to stain the soles. He had come from São Paulo that morning, a 3.5-hour drive, listening to the silence of the car as if it were a sentence. The real estate agency had already sent the contract by email. All that was left was to sign, photograph the property, assess its condition, and release the sale. The buyer was an agribusiness entrepreneur who wanted to tear everything down and build a warehouse for machinery. Renato had no reason to hesitate. He hadn't set foot there since his grandfather's death 12 years ago. No one else in the family was interested in that forgotten piece of land nestled among the hills. His mother had died before his grandfather. His father never truly existed. He existed only as a name on a document and as an absence on all the dates that mattered. And Renato had moved on with his life. He studied, worked, built a career in logistics, married, divorced, married again, divorced again, and at some point along the way realized he was merely moving, not living. Each professional achievement was a medal hanging on a wall that no one visited. Each relationship was an attempt to recreate something he never had, and each failure confirmed an old, silent, corrosive suspicion that he wasn't made to be loved. He pushed open the gate. The hinge creaked as if protesting against the visitor. The stone path to the main house was covered in low grass, but still visible. The mango trees his grandfather had planted decades ago were enormous, with branches that curved over the roof like protective arms. And it was when he turned the corner of the house, skirting the side porch, that his feet stopped before his brain could comprehend why. There were clothes on the clothesline. It wasn't an abandoned clothesline with forgotten rags. It was a clothesline stretched between two wooden posts, with clean, organized clothes, swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. There was a flowered cotton dress, 2 small children's t-shirts, a white sheet with worn edges, a dish towel with a sunflower embroidery. Renato felt his heart clench before he understood why. Someone lived there. Someone had moved into his grandfather's ranch without his knowledge. He walked to the kitchen door, which was ajar, and knocked on the wood with his knuckles. The sound echoed down the dark hallway. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then he heard light, hurried footsteps and a thin child's voice saying something he couldn't make out. The door opened slowly, and a woman appeared in the doorway, holding a wooden spoon in one hand and keeping the other on the shoulder of a little girl who was hiding behind her legs. The woman was perhaps in her early 30s. Her dark hair was tied in a loose bun, with a few strands escaping across her face. She wore a simple dress, her bare feet resting on the cement floor. But what Renato noticed first were her eyes. Large, brown, with an expression that mixed fear and dignity in equal measure, like someone who had already learned that apologizing doesn't always protect, but who still refused to lower her head. "Can I help?" she asked, her voice firm despite everything. Renato swallowed hard. "I own this property." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. The woman didn't recoil, but something shifted in her eyes, a fleeting shadow, like a cloud passing over an open field. She pressed her lips together. The little girl behind her clung tighter to her mother's dress. "I know you're the owner," she said after a moment. "Mr. Alipio let us stay. Before he died. He said it was no problem, that the house was empty anyway." So Alipio was the grandfather. Renato remained silent, trying to process the information. His grandfather had let that woman live there. When? Why? He had never known anything. But thinking about it, he had never asked either, never visited, never called. In his grandfather's last years, Renato sent money by bank transfer and thought that was enough. He thought love could be deposited like a salary, in installments, without presence, without a face. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. 9 years. The answer hit Renato like a silent punch. 9 years. That woman had lived there longer than he had ever lived on the ranch in his entire life. He used to spend vacations there as a child, weeks at most. She had built an entire life within those walls. "We take care of everything," she continued, as if she needed to justify her own existence. I keep the land clean, the vegetable garden, the trees. I fixed the roof of the shed when a storm hit. I painted the kitchen. I replaced the bathroom faucet. Each sentence was spoken with a restrained dignity that made Renato feel ashamed without knowing exactly why. Her name was Lúcia. The girl was Manuela, 7 years old with enormous, curious eyes, always carrying a sketchbook under her arm. Lúcia had arrived at the ranch fleeing a marriage that wasn't a marriage. It was captivity. Her husband beat her. He beat her when he drank. He beat her when he didn't drink. He beat her when she breathed too loudly. He beat her when the soup was lukewarm. He beat her just because the world was unfair to him and someone had to pay. And Lúcia was the easiest debt to settle. She fled one rainy dawn with baby Manuela in her arms and a plastic bag containing 3 changes of clothes. She walked along dirt roads until she reached the nearest small town, where a lady from the church pointed out the abandoned ranch of an old man who lived alone up on the hill. So Alipio opened the door without asking anything. He looked at the wet woman holding the crying baby and simply said, "Come in, girl. The bed in the back room is made." And he never asked her to leave again. During the last 3 years of her grandfather's life, Lúcia cared for him. She cooked, did laundry, gave him medicine, held his hand when his fever rose, read passages from the Bible when he asked, and remained silent when he didn't want to hear anything. When her grandfather Alipio died, it was Lúcia who dressed his body, called the priest, organized the wake, and planted a yellow trumpet tree, IPE, in the spot where he liked to sit and watch the sunset. Renato learned of the death through a call from the city hall. He sent money for the funeral. He didn't go. Now he stood there in the kitchen that Lúcia had painted light yellow, looking at the pot on the wood-burning stove, where something was simmering with the smell of cassava and chicken, and feeling something strange stirring in his chest. Something that wasn't anger or indifference or haste. It was something he hadn't felt in too long to name. "I'm going to sell the ranch," he said, because it was the truth, and because he didn't know how else to say it. Lúcia nodded. That was all. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She didn't ask where she was going. She simply nodded, as if she'd been expecting that moment since day one, as if she had lived 9 years on ground she always knew was borrowed. "We'll leave whenever you need us," she said, and went back to stirring the pot. Renato left the kitchen and walked around the yard. He needed air. He needed distance from those brown eyes that asked for nothing, and precisely for that reason, asked for everything. He went to the shed that Lúcia had mentioned repairing. The roof was sturdy. The walls had been reinforced with simple but well-done mortar. Inside, his grandfather's tools were organized on shelves that hadn't been there before, shelves made from repurposed wooden crates, sanded and painted moss green. In the corner, there was a small table with a vase of wildflowers and an open notebook with notes on planting. Sow tomatoes, 2nd week of September. Water basil every morning. Prune rose bushes before the full moon. Renato stood before that small table as if he were reading a love letter written to him by someone he had never met. The handwriting was neat and tidy, the work of someone who had learned to write through effort and transformed each word into an act of persistence. He got back in his car and called the real estate agency. "I need a few more days," he said. The agent protested. The buyer was in a hurry. The offer was good. Renato repeated, "A few more days?" and hung up. He didn't know why he asked for more time. Or perhaps he did know, but didn't want to admit it. There was something about that place that pulled him with a force that wasn't nostalgia. It was something more alive, more present, more urgent. As if the ranch was trying to tell him something he hadn't yet learned to hear. That night, Renato slept in his grandfather's old room. Lúcia changed the sheets without him asking, left a pitcher of water on the bedside table and a clean towel on the chair. Through the thin wall, he heard her voice telling Manuela a bedtime story. It was the story of a bird that was afraid to fly and lived on the lowest branch of a very tall tree. Until one day the wind ripped the branch off, and the bird discovered it already knew how to fly. It just hadn't needed to before. Lucia's voice was soft, rhythmic, full of a tenderness that made the air seem lighter. Renato lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and felt something warm and uncomfortable rise in his throat. He didn't cry, but it came close. In the morning he woke to the smell of coffee and cheese bread. When he went to the kitchen, Manuela was sitting at the table drawing with colored pencils. She looked at him with a fearless curiosity, the pure curiosity of children who haven't yet learned to distrust the world. "Young man, are you the owner of the large mango?" Renato didn't understand. "Big mango?" "The mango tree is out there, the biggest one. Grandpa Alipio said it has a name. He called it Hope." Renato felt the ground give way beneath him for a second. He remembered. His grandfather really did call that mango tree Hope. He had planted it when his wife became pregnant with Renato's mother. "I plant a tree for every new life," his grandfather used to say. "That way, when we're gone, someone will be standing in our place." "Yes, I am the owner." Renato replied, his voice weaker than he intended. She produces the best mangoes in the world, Manuela declared with absolute conviction. Sweet as honey. My mother makes juice from them, and we drink it every afternoon. Lúcia appeared from the service area, drying her hands on a cloth. Manuela, don't bother the boy. She doesn't bother me, Renato said. And it was true. The days went by, and Renato remained there without any rational explanation. He worked remotely on his laptop, answering emails on the balcony while the mountain wind ruffled the papers he insisted on printing. He watched Lúcia tend to the garden with a patience he had never seen in anyone. She talked to the plants. Not in an eccentric or performative way, in a natural way, like someone who knows that everything alive responds to affection, even in silence. Come on, tomato plant, you can do it, she would say, adjusting a bamboo stake to support the branch laden with fruit. Renato watched from afar and felt something akin to envy. Envy of someone who could dedicate themselves to something small with such completeness. He started helping without anyone asking. First, he fixed a loose fence in the pasture. Then he unclogged the rain gutter. After that, he pruned a dry branch that threatened to fall on the roof. Each task was simple, manual, silent, and strangely comforting. He, who spent his days in virtual meetings discussing spreadsheets and quarterly goals, felt, for the first time in years, that his hands were good for something other than typing. Lúcia didn't express her gratitude with exaggerated words. She thanked him in her own way, leaving a larger plate of food on his table, washing the shirt he'd dirtied, placing a sprig of rosemary in his room because it wards off nightmares. Renato didn't know that rosemary warded off nightmares. He also didn't know that he slept better there than in any apartment he'd ever had in São Paulo. One Wednesday afternoon, he was sitting on the trunk of a felled tree, watching Manuela draw under the Esperança mango tree. The girl drew with fierce concentration, the tip of her tongue peeking out of the corner of her mouth. Renato approached. "What are you drawing?" She turned the notebook over. It was a house, simple, with a red roof, yellow windows, a blue door, smoke coming out of the chimney. In front of the house, 3 figures holding hands, a woman, a girl, and a taller man. "Who are these people?" Renato asked, although he already sensed the answer before she spoke. "It's my mother, me, and..." Manuela hesitated. "And the young man who looks after the fence." Renato remained silent for a long moment. The mountain breeze passed between them, carrying the scent of damp earth. He looked at the drawing, those crooked figures made with worn-colored pencils, lacking proportion and perspective, and saw more truth there than in any report he had ever signed. "It turned out beautiful," he said. Manuela smiled. And that smile broke something inside him, something that needed to be broken so that something else could be born. That night, Renato stayed on the balcony after dinner. Lúcia appeared after putting Manuela to bed and sat at the other end of the bench, keeping a respectful distance. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that only exists between people who already understand each other without needing translation. "You never asked me why I came," Renato said. "I know why you came. You came to sell. And you never asked me why I'm still here." Lúcia looked at him for the first time that night. The moonlight cast half her face in silver and left the other half in shadow. "It's none of my business." "Perhaps it is." She looked away towards the horizon, where the dark mountains stood out against the starry sky. "I learned not to expect anything from people, Renato. It's not bitterness, it's protection. When you expect nothing, anything good that happens is a gift, and when something bad happens, you were already prepared. That's sad. This is real." Another silence. The crickets sang like a perfectly out-of-tune orchestra. Somewhere in the pasture, a cow mooed softly, as if it too were conversing with the night. "Was my grandfather a good man?" Renato asked. Lúcia took a while to answer. When she spoke, her voice had a different texture, softer, deeper. "Mr. Alipio was the best man I ever knew. Not because he did great things, because he did the small things, every day, without fail. He treated me like a person, Renato. You don't know what that means to someone who spent years being treated like an object." Renato felt the shame rise again, hot and inescapable. He had a grandfather who was the best man anyone had ever known, and he hadn't been there during his final years. He sent money, he sent distance, he sent silence. And he thought that was enough. "I should have come," he said, more to himself. "You're here now." Those 4 words hung in the air like an offering. Lúcia didn't say them with judgment or forgiveness. She said them as a fact, a door that wasn't locked. The following morning, Renato called the real estate agency and canceled the sale. The broker was furious. He spoke of contractual penalties, lost opportunities, irrational behavior. Renato listened to everything with the calm of someone who finally recognizes that the worst irrationality of his life wasn't canceling a contract. It was having lived 43 years, as if the only thing that mattered fit into a spreadsheet. He didn't tell Lúcia immediately. He needed to be sure the decision was real, that it wasn't just a passing emotion brought on by the mountain air and childhood nostalgia. But the days continued to pass, and the certainty didn't diminish. It grew, slowly and steadily, like the roots of the Esperanza mango tree. Renato began renovating the shed. He didn't hire anyone. He did it himself, with his grandfather's tools, following tutorials on his cell phone when he didn't know how to do something. The hands that once typed reports now held a hammer and saw. He made mistakes, redid them, learned, and made mistakes again. Lúcia watched from afar, saying nothing. Manuela would appear from time to bring a glass of lemonade and sit on the floor watching, as if renovating a shed were the most fascinating spectacle in the world. One afternoon, while Renato was trying to level a shelf that kept staying crooked, Lúcia appeared in the doorway of the shed with an expression he had never seen on her face before. It wasn't fear, it wasn't distrust, it was vulnerability, pure, exposed, almost unbearably honest. "Renato," he dropped the hammer. "What? Why are you doing all this?" He looked at her, then at the crooked shelf, then at his own hands, dirty with sawdust, with a small cut on his thumb that he hadn't even noticed. He could have given 1,000 answers. He could have talked about investing, about market value, about preserving wealth. But something in those brown eyes demanded the whole truth, unvarnished. "Because I've spent my whole life building things that don't matter. And now I've found something that does matter, and I don't want to lose it." Lúcia didn't answer. She stood in the doorway, the afternoon light streaming behind her and outlining her silhouette in a way that made Renato think of church-stained glass windows. Not for their sanctity, but for the beauty that only appears when light shines through something that has already been broken. "I'm not something for you to fix," she said quietly. "I know. I'm not talking about you." He paused. "I'm talking about myself." She held his gaze for 3 seconds, 5, 7. Then she nodded slowly, like someone accepting a truth that will still need time to be trusted. And she left. Renato stayed in the shed until sunset. The shelf remained crooked. The weeks turned into months with the natural rhythm of the seasons. The ranch changed, not in grand ways, but steadily. Renato repaired the gate, repainted the facade, replaced the broken roof tiles. He planted a jaboticaba tree in the yard because Manuela said it was her favorite fruit. He bought new books for the girl at the town fair and was surprised when she read them all in less than a week and asked for more. He installed a new light on the porch so that Lúcia could see better when she embroidered at night. She embroidered roses and sunflowers and birds on dish towels that she sold at the fair, with colors so vibrant they seemed about to leap off the fabric and fly away. Their connection grew slowly, like a tree. There were no declarations, no stolen kisses in the rain. There were gestures, there was presence, there was the silent building of a trust that blossoms when two wounded people decide, without haste and without promises, that it's safe to let their guard down. Renato learned Lúcia's rhythm. She woke before sunrise to make coffee. She tended the garden until 9. She did embroidery until noon. She cooked. She took Manuela to school in the city, on foot, 3 kilometers there and 3 back, every day, rain or shine. She picked her up in the afternoon, helped with homework, made dinner, told stories. And she repeated it all the next day, without complaining, without asking if life owed her more, without demanding an explanation from the world for the injustice of being born on the wrong side of fate. Observing that routine, Renato felt an admiration that couldn't be put into words. It wasn't pity. Pity was what outsiders felt when they looked at Lúcia. Poor thing, a single mother. She fled an abusive husband. She lives on a borrowed ranch. But up close, from the inside, what one saw was something else. What one saw was a woman who transformed an abandoned piece of land into a home, who raised an intelligent, kind, and courageous daughter in a world that tried to crush them both, who kept her dignity intact when everything around her crumbled. There was nothing pitiful about Lúcia. There was a strength that the truly strong rarely possess, the strength of someone who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Renato, on the other hand, began to see his own weakness with uncomfortable clarity. He had money, he was educated, he had an imported car parked in front of a dirt ranch. And yet, when he compared what he had built with what Lúcia had built, he felt he was on the poorer side of the equation. She had built love. He had built a resume. One June night, as cold as only mountain nights can be, Lúcia fell ill. High fever, dry cough, body aches. Renato took Manuela to school in the morning, driving because the 3 kilometers on foot in the cold seemed absurd now that he was there to do things differently. He returned, made ginger tea following the instructions. Lúcia murmured between coughing fits, covered her with 2 blankets, and sat beside the bed, waiting for the fever to subside. Lúcia fell asleep. Renato stayed there, looking at her face, The long eyelashes, the smooth forehead, the small hands gripping the edge of the blanket as if, even asleep, she were still trying to protect herself from something. He understood, at that moment, with a clarity that ached like an open fracture, that he was in love with that woman. It wasn't the cinematic passion he knew from films and books. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't made of grand gestures and background music. It was something more like the root of the hope mango tree, subterranean, deep, silent, impossible to uproot without destroying everything around it. When Lúcia recovered 3 days later, she found the kitchen clean, the vegetable garden watered, the embroidery neatly arranged on the living room table, and a vase of wildflowers on the bedroom windowsill. She said nothing. But when Renato came in for breakfast, she served his plate with slightly trembling hands, and he noticed that her eyes were red, not from fever, but from something she was trying with all her might to suppress. They continued like that, side by side, without a label, without a definition, without the pressure of naming what was growing between them. It was as if they both knew that this feeling was too fragile to be rushed, that any word that was too big could break it, like a soap bubble that only exists as long as no one tries to hold it. But life, as always, doesn't respect people's time. One morning in August, a black car pulled up in front of the ranch. Renato was on the porch when he saw two men get out, dark suits, leather briefcases, expressions that suggested they were taking pleasure in collecting debts. They were lawyers. They represented Lucia's ex-husband. Diego, that was his name, had discovered where Lúcia lived. He wanted custody of Manuela, not out of love, out of control. Because men like Diego don't lose. They reposition themselves. He had remarried, had a stable job, a house in the city, a convincing narrative to present to the judge, a reformed father who wants to offer a better life to the daughter whose irresponsible mother keeps her on an isolated ranch without adequate infrastructure. The lawyers delivered the summons with the cold efficiency of those who do it every day. Lúcia received the envelope with both hands, read the contents slowly, and did not cry. But Renato saw the color drain from her face as if someone had pulled a curtain from behind her eyes. She folded the paper, put it in her dress pocket, and said, in a voice that seemed to come from a very deep and very dark place, "He's going to take my daughter away." "It won't. You don't know him, Renato. He has money. He has lawyers. He has people. I have nothing. You have everything." She looked at him as if he were speaking another language. "I live on a borrowed ranch. I sell dish towels at the market. I didn't finish high school. What judge is going to look at me and think I'm the best option?" Renato felt a fury rising in his chest. Not against Lúcia, not against the system, but against every brick of a world built to convince people like her that they weren't enough. People who raised children alone, who transformed ruins into homes, who embroidered sunflowers on dish towels while the world treated them as invisible. "This ranch isn't borrowed," he said. "It's yours." Lúcia frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm going to transfer this property to your name, and I'm going to pay the best lawyer there is to guarantee that no one will take Manuela away from you. I can't accept this. It's not charity, Lúcia. It's justice. My grandfather let you stay because he knew this place belonged to whoever took care of it. You took care of it. You took care of my grandfather. You took care of the land. You took care of everything I abandoned. If anyone has a right to this ranch, it's you." Lúcia opened her mouth to protest, but what came out wasn't a word. It was a broken sound, a swallowed sob, a dam that finally gave way after years of holding back the pressure. She covered her face with her hands and cried, not from sadness, but from something that has no name in the Portuguese language, something that lies between the relief and disbelief of someone receiving for the first time what life has always denied them. Renato didn't hug her, he didn't touch her, he just stood there, firm, present, like a wall that won't fall. The legal process lasted 4 months. It was exhausting, invasive, humiliating in the way only legal proceedings can be, transforming a woman's intimate life into paragraphs of a petition, reducing years of sacrifice to pieces of evidence, measuring love in square meters and paychecks. But the lawyer Renato hired was relentless, a 52-year-old woman who had built her entire career defending mothers in vulnerable situations, and who looked at lawyers like Diego's the same way Lúcia looked at weeds in a garden, as something that needed to be pulled out by the roots. Manuela was heard by the judge in a special room. When asked where she wanted to live, she said, in that thin, firm voice that was an exact copy of her mother's, "At my house, with my mother. Where the Hope mango tree is." The judge granted permanent custody to Lúcia. On the day the decision came out, Lúcia was in the garden picking tomatoes. Renato got out of the car with the paper in his hand, walked over to her, and handed her the sheet without saying anything. Lúcia read it. She read it again. She looked at Renato. She looked at the paper. And then she did something she had never done before. She smiled. Not a polite smile, not a shy smile, not a smile of someone asking permission to be happy. A whole, open smile with her eyes shining with a light that Renato realized had always been there, hidden beneath layers of fear, waiting for the safe moment to appear. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. You did everything. I know, but you stayed." To stay, it was so simple and so rare. In a world of people who leave, who depart, who give up, who promise and disappear, who love with an expiration date and care conditionally, staying was the most revolutionary act anyone could offer. And Renato, who had spent his entire life leaving everything and everyone, had finally stayed. The property transfer was completed at the notary's office on a rainy Tuesday in November. Lúcia signed her name with the same neat, round handwriting she used in her notes about planting. When they left the notary's office, Manuela was waiting on a park bench, reading a book that was too thick for her size. And when she saw them leaving, she shouted, "Is the house ours now?" Lúcia nodded. Manuela jumped off the bench and hugged her mother with a force that almost knocked them both over. Then, without letting go of Lúcia, she reached out to Renato and pulled him into the embrace. And there, in the town square under a fine rain that looked more like mist, 3 people whom life had tried to separate in every possible way held each other as if they were saying to the world, "We exist, we matter, we are here." Renato never truly returned to São Paulo. Not really. He went back a few times to settle outstanding matters, terminate contracts, and empty the apartment that had never been a home. He brought few belongings, some books, his laptop, a photo of his mother that he kept in his office drawer. He left the rest behind with the ease of someone who finally understands the difference between having and belonging. He set up a small office in the renovated shed and began working as a freelance consultant, earning half the salary but with twice the purpose. Lúcia expanded her vegetable garden, started selling organic baskets at the market, and earned a column in the city newspaper about sustainable farming. Manuela started attending a better school in the neighboring city. Renato drove her there and picked her up every day, and on the way back they would invent stories together, each adding a part. And the stories were always about birds learning to fly or trees protecting those who needed shade. On a warm, starry December night, Renato and Lúcia were on the veranda after dinner. Manuela was asleep. The crickets were chirping. The Esperança mango tree swayed gently in the breeze, its leaves making that soft, rustling sound that sounds like paper being crumpled by gentle hands. "Lúcia, I need to tell you something." She looked at him. There was no fear in her eyes. Not anymore. There was something akin to readiness, like a field before the rain, prepared to receive whatever comes. "I love you," he said. "I don't know any other way to say it. I tried to find a more beautiful, more poetic way, more worthy of everything you are. But I only know how to say it like this. I love you, and I love Manuela, and I love this land, and I never want to leave again." Lúcia remained silent for so long that Renato thought he had made an irreparable mistake. But then she moved, slowly, like someone crossing a river on stones, and rested her head on his shoulder. The gesture was small. But it contained everything. It contained 9 years of waiting. It contained 1,000 nights of loneliness. It contained all the times she thought she would never again be touched with care. It contained the permission she finally gave herself, not to be loved by him, but to believe that she deserved to be loved. "Me too," she said, so softly that the wind almost carried the words away. Renato didn't move. He stayed there, with the weight of that head on his shoulder, smelling the scent of milk and rosemary soap, listening to her breathing calm down and understanding, perhaps for the first time in his life, that happiness is not a destination. It's a repeated decision. It's waking up every day and choosing to stay, choosing to care, choosing to see. It's planting a tree that will bear fruit for another generation. It's fixing a fence that no one will notice. It's telling a story to a child to help them fall asleep. It's placing flowers on a windowsill. It's doing all this without expecting applause, without expecting reward, without expecting anything, just because it's right, just because it's human, just because it's love. Outside, the Esperança mango tree was laden with fruit. The mangoes hung from the branches like fulfilled promises, heavy with sweetness, ripe with time. The grandfather had planted that tree 60 years ago without knowing that one day it would provide shade for a runaway woman, a girl who drew houses with blue doors, and a lost grandson who finally found his way back. But perhaps he knew. Perhaps that's why he called her Hope.